Number 1. Attila the Hun. Okay, we're starting this video off with a story of the most feared man in history. In March 453 AD in Pannonia, modern-day Hungary, Attila is known throughout the Roman Empire as the Scourge of God. He's conquered half of Europe, brought the mighty Romans to their knees, and forced emperors to pay him literal mountains of gold to stay away from their cities. Attila wasn't particularly tall, often described as short, but he was incredibly strong. He wielded one of history's most legendary weapons, called the Sword of Mars, aka the Sword of God. He wasn't just any warlord either. He was the ruler of the Huns from 434 to 453 AD. Now, you're probably thinking he was a bonehead, but Attila was actually quite educated. Not only could he speak and read Gothic and Latin, he was trained in archery, sword fighting, and horseback riding from childhood. It seemed like he could do anything, and to the people, he was the closest thing to God. Attila and his older brother Bleda inherited joint control of the Hun Empire from their uncles. Their first move was to negotiate a treaty with the Eastern Roman Empire, in which Emperor Theodosius II agreed to pay 700 pounds of gold annually as tribute to keep the Huns from attacking. But that wasn't enough for the brothers. 12 years later, the brothers broke the treaty and led a devastating series of raids through the Eastern Roman cities. With Hun forces getting within 20 miles of Constantinople, the capital, Theodosius was forced to make new terms. He agreed to pay the whopping sum of 2,100 pounds of gold per year, triple what he'd already been paying. That's insane. That's about $76 million every year in today's dollars. So, just like that, the Huns retreated, very satisfied with their extortion money. Then, in 445 AD, his brother mysteriously died. Mysteriously. Most historians are pretty sure Attila straight up murdered his own brother to take over the empire. But hey, no one can prove it. Convenient timing though, right? So Attila invaded Eastern Europe repeatedly, devastating dozens of cities. Historians wrote that there were so many murders and bloodlettings that the dead could not be numbered. Over 100 cities were captured, and laid there were thousands upon thousands of bodies. No one could stop this guy. He was like the Tom Brady of war. In 450 AD, he invaded the Western Roman Empire, marching through Gaul, which is modern-day France. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains was one of the bloodiest battles in history, with the combined Roman and Visigoth forces barely managing to defeat him. Despite this setback, Attila invaded Italy and devastated the northern provinces. He marched toward Rome itself, and the entire Roman world held its breath. They asked themselves, would the Eternal City finally fall to the barbarians? But suddenly, Attila stopped the march at the River Po and didn't proceed. What happened next has been debated for 1,500 years. Legends say Pope Leo I personally met Attila near Mantua and convinced him not to attack Rome through the power of his words and faith. But I think the reality was disease spreading through his army and supply shortages. Roman sources mention plague ravaging the Hun forces, and Attila's supply lines were stretched thinner than my hairline. As a result, Attila retreated, but immediately began planning more campaigns against the Romans. Despite his power and wealth, Attila lived like a monk. According to the Roman historian Priscus, who actually visited Attila's headquarters and dined with him, he served his guests luxurious meals on literal silver platters, while he ate nothing but meat on a wooden trencher. His cup was wooden, while his guests were given goblets of gold and silver. His dress was simple, he only demanded to be clean. While his subordinates arrogantly displayed gold and gems on their horse bridles and weapons, Attila showed restraint. But he wasn't perfect. He did have some weaknesses. The first was women. He had many wives, countless according to the sources. And second, well, he was a frat bro, known for his heavy drinking. In March 453 AD, at 47 years old, Attila married again. His new bride was a young, beautiful Germanic woman named Ildiko. This was marriage number 6, and there was a huge feast to celebrate, and Attila gave himself up to excessive joy at his wedding, eating and drinking heavily late into the night. Finally, he retired to his bridal chamber with Ildiko. The next morning, Attila didn't appear. His guards waited outside the bridal chamber, getting more and more worried as the hours passed. The great king should have been up by now. They knew his habits. No matter how much he drunk the night before, he always rose early. After a great uproar and debate about what to do, they kicked and broke down the door. They found Attila dead in bed, absolutely covered in blood. The smell hits them first. That thick, metallic, something is very wrong here smell of way too much blood. Ildiko was at his bedside, weeping hysterically beneath her veil. But here's the strange thing. There were no wounds on Attila's body, none whatsoever. His face was covered in blood, and there were stains all over the bed, dried and dark, soaked into the linens. But his skin was unbroken. No stab wounds, no cuts, not even a scratch. It was said that Attila was heavy with wine and sleep, meaning he was drunk and passed out on his back. While lying there, he suffered a severe nosebleed. A rush of superfluous blood, which would normally come from his nose, streamed in deadly course down his throat, but he was too drunk to wake up and turn over. The blood pooled in his throat and lungs. He likely tried to cough, to breathe, but only inhaled more blood. His body convulsed weakly, but consciousness never returned. So Attila the Hun, the scourge of God, the terror of Rome, choked to death on his own blood from a nosebleed. Some people suggested other theories. Maybe Ildiko murdered him, stabbing him or smothering him in his sleep. Others suggested a conspiracy with the Byzantine emperor who had just stopped paying tribute to the Huns. But most historians reject these conspiracy theories. It was almost certainly an insane freak accident. A drunk man with a nosebleed who choked on his own blood. Attila's body was placed in 3 coffins for burial, an inner coffin of gold, a middle coffin of silver, and an outer coffin of iron, and to this day, Attila's tomb has never been found. But here's the real kicker that shows just how important Attila was. His death caused the immediate collapse of the Hun Empire. His sons Elik, Dengizic, and Ernik fought each other for power. The army was divided to support different sons, and just 1 year after Attila's death, the Huns were defeated at the Battle of Nedao. Within a few years, the entire Hun Empire was gone. The Huns effectively disappeared from history. One man had been holding it all together. The man who survived countless battles against Rome's greatest armies, slaughtered and conquered most of Europe, who was feared by millions and known as the Scourge of God, was killed on his wedding night. No enemy army had managed it, no assassin's blade, no battlefield wound. One of history's most powerful conquerors, undone by his own blood. The Scourge of God, silenced by a nosebleed. It's honestly one of history's most insanely anticlimactic deaths for such a legendary figure. You can't make this stuff up. Number 2, Sigurd the Mighty. A cold wind blows across the Scottish Highlands, 892 AD, as a massive Viking warrior named Sigurd Eysteinsson rides his horse home. Strapped to his saddle as a trophy is the severed head of his defeated enemy, still dripping blood onto his boot. They call him the Mighty, and today proved why. See, Sigurd was actually the 2nd Earl of Orkney. That's a collection of islands off northern Scotland. His brother had earned the title by helping the King of Norway kick out some Viking pirates. But then he was like, nah, I'm good, and passed it to Sigurd. And Sigurd? Oh, Sigurd took the job very seriously, expanding his territory throughout northern Scotland, where he got the nickname the Mighty. He was the most feared Viking in the region. Around 892 AD, Sigurd set his sights on the kingdom of Moray in northern Scotland. It was valuable land with timber, fertile soil for crops, and perfect for launching raids further south. The local ruler was a man named Mael Brigte, who had his own interesting nickname. He was actually called the Bucktoothed because he had this massive front tooth that stuck out like a tusk. Being the guy that he is, Sigurd challenged Mael Brigte to settle things with an honorable battle. 40 men versus 40 men. Winner takes the kingdom. Now, here's where things get interesting. Mael Brigte showed up honorably with exactly 40 warriors, ready to fight fair and square. But Sigurd decides to, reinterpret the rules. By which I mean, he straight up cheats. He brought 80 men, but hid it by putting 2 warriors on each of his 40 horses. From a distance, it looked like he only had 40 men riding toward the battlefield, but when they got close, and his 80 warriors dismounted, Maelbrigte realized he'd been tricked. He was outnumbered 2 to 1. Not very honorable, Mr. Sigurd. But to his credit, Maelbrigte didn't back down. His final order to his outnumbered men was epic. Kill at least 1 man before we die ourselves. Maelbrigte's men fought like cornered wolves, but Sigurd's forces swarmed them. Within an hour, the battlefield was carpeted with bodies. His warriors fought valiantly, but as you would expect, they were massacred. The battle was over quickly and decisively. Afterwards, Sigurd ordered all of his enemies beheaded. He personally decapitated Maelbrigte with 1 swift stroke of his battle axe, and as a show of dominance, tied the severed head to his saddle as a trophy. That massive protruding tooth jutted out. It was such an eyesore even in death. With the smell of blood and victory in the air, the Vikings mounted their horses and began the long ride home, victorious and celebrating their conquest of Moray. But remember that bucktooth? As Sigurd rode home over the rough Scottish terrain, that severed head bounced around on his saddle. With every bump in the road, Maelbrigte's protruding tooth scraped and scratched against Sigurd's bare leg. It was a small cut, nothing to worry about for the mighty Viking warrior. I bet Sigurd didn't even notice it at first. But over the next few days, the wound was inflamed. Then it became infected. On the second day, red streaks spiderwebbed up his thigh. By the third, the leg had swollen to twice its size, hot to the touch and oozing pus. Sigurd's warriors watched helplessly as fever consumed their lord, as his mighty frame had been reduced to a sweating, delirious shadow of the man he had been. Due to Sigurd's fever, he couldn't walk and could barely speak. The scratch had become a serious medical emergency, and in 982 AD, if you were sick or had an infection, you were doomed. In one of the most bizarre ways, within a week, the mighty Earl of Orkney was dead, killed by sepsis from the tooth of the man he'd just defeated and beheaded. Sigurd the Mighty was literally killed by a severed head. He cheated his way to victory, massacred his honorable opponent, and his dead enemy got the last laugh from beyond the grave. To this day, he's known in history as the Earl who was defeated by a decapitated head. If you ask me, the moral of the story is that karma's a real thing. Number 3. Draco. Picture Athens in 621 BC, a city drowning in blood feuds, where the rich murder with impunity and the poor die not knowing what laws they've broken. Into this chaos steps one man with a radical solution named Draco. Draco was actually the first legislator of Athens, the guy who created the city's first written constitution around 621 BC. Before Draco, Athens had no written laws at all. The legal system was completely through word of mouth, known only to the powerful ruling class who applied the laws however they wanted. Poor people had no idea what the rules were or what the hell was going on. If you got accused of something, there was no way to defend yourself because you didn't even know what the law said. Blood feuds and vendettas were common, as families took justice into their own hands. The powerful always won, regardless of whether they were right, and Athens was drowning in political decline and social unrest. So the citizens begged Draco to create written laws that everyone could see, laws that would apply equally to rich and poor. This was revolutionary. He actually played God. Draco wrote his laws on wooden tablets shaped like 3-sided pyramids that could pivot on their axis so you could read all sides. These tablets were posted in public places throughout Athens, so everyone had access to them. For the first time in Athenian history, there was equality before the law, regardless of wealth or status. This was a huge step forward for ancient democracy. Now, here's the catch. Draco's laws were insanely harsh. And when I say harsh, I mean like psychotically harsh. The death penalty for basically everything. Steal a cabbage? Death. Steal an apple? Death. Owe someone money? They can enslave you. When asked why he made the punishment for small crimes so severe, Draco replied with this crazy quote, "Small crimes deserve death, and I have no greater punishment for greater crimes." His laws were said to be written in blood. Executions were carried out in 3 different ways. The first involved throwing the sentenced person down a deep pit or chasm. The second was to leave them tied to a wooden board to die of exposure and thirst. And the third was forcing them to drink poisonous hemlock. What I didn't know is that this is where the word draconian, meaning extremely harsh and severe, comes from. To this day, 2,600 years later, we still use his name to describe brutal laws and punishments. He wasn't all bad, I guess. There were some good parts to Draco's legal code. He distinguished between murder and involuntary homicide, or accidental killing. Murder got you the death penalty, but if you accidentally killed someone, you'd just be exiled from Athens. He created special courts for different types of homicide cases, and he ended the blood feud system by making the state responsible for prosecuting murder cases instead of leaving it to grieving families seeking revenge. These were genuine improvements to Athenian society. Still, people eventually got sick of all the executions. Who would have thought that killing people for stealing vegetables was a bit much? His laws were so harsh that the rich and poor banded together to exile him from Athens, where he spent his final years on the island of Aegina. But Draco still had aura, and gave a speech at the Aeginetan Theater, a major venue that drew crowds from across the Greek world. What his speech was about is lost to history, but the audience's reaction is not. They cheered, applauded, and showed their appreciation in the traditional Greek way of the era, by throwing their clothes at him. This was the highest honor, a gesture reserved for the most revered speakers. Cloaks flew through the air, hats, chitons, himatians, all landing on and around Draco as the applause thundered. But what started as honor became horror. The throwing continued and continued. The pile of clothing grew higher. Draco must have smiled at first. What legislator doesn't dream of such a claim? But then a heavy wool cloak struck his chest, staggering him backward. Another landed on his shoulders. Then another. He tried to call out, but his voice was muffled by layers of fabric. His arms were pinned. His knees buckled under the weight. The crowd, seeing him bend forward, assumed he was bowing in gratitude and threw even more. Draco collapsed beneath the mountain of cloth. The applause continued. No one realized what was happening until the theater fell suddenly silent, and by then, the man who had written laws in blood had suffocated under the weight of his admirers' love. What an insane way to go. The man who created brutally harsh laws that killed countless people died in the most ridiculous, non-violent way possible. He was literally honored to death by his fans. It turned out though, his laws weren't any good either. Less than 50 years later, almost all of Draco's laws were repealed by Solon, the father of modern Western law, who only kept the homicide law.